Hello everyone, my name is Jolamanov Balasa, and in this following video you will be introduced to the concept of effective feedback or how to give feedback. First of all, let's answer to the question of what is the feedback. Feedback is a process in which learners make sense of information about their performance and use it to enhance the quality of their work or learning strategies. Now we figured out the definition of feedback, and let's talk about importance of feedback in assessment. Feedback is an important part of the assessment process. It has significant effect on student learning and has been described as the most powerful single moderator that enhances achievement. There are main objectives of feedback. First, justify to students how their mark or grade was derived. Identify and reward specific qualities in student work. The third is guide students on what steps to make to improve. The next is motivate them to act on their assessment, and the last is develop their capability to monitor, evaluate and regulate their own learning. To benefit student learning, feedback needs to be constructive, timely, and meaningful. Constructive feedback when as well as highlighting the strengths and weaknesses of given piece of work. It should set out ways in which the student can improve the work. For the student, it encourages them to think critically about their work and reflect on what they need to do to improve it, helps them see their learning in new ways and gain increased satisfaction from it, helps promote dialogue between staff and students. Timeline feedback is when give feedback while the assessed work is still fresh in a student's mind before the student moves on to the subsequent tasks. And the last meaningful is when it should target individual needs, be linked to specific assessment criteria, and be received by a student in time to benefit subsequent work. Effective feedback should guide students to adapt and adjust their learning strategies, guides teachers to adapt and adjust teaching to accommodate students' learning needs, also guides students to become independent and self-reflective learners and a better critic of their own work. Also, effective feedback when it stimulates reflection, interaction, and a dialogue about learning improvement. It's constructive so that students feel encouraged and motivated to improve. Also, effective feedback has consequences so that it engages students by requiring them to attend to the feedback as part of the assessment is efficient so that staff can manage it effectively. Also, feedback is valuable when it is received, understood, and acted on. How students analyze, discuss, and act on feedback is important as the quality of the feedback itself. Through the interaction students have the feedback, they come to understand how to develop their learning. Also, there are different types of feedback. Feedback can take many forms such as oral, written, informal, formal, descriptive, evaluative, peer, and self-assessed feedback. Students and the parents need to be made aware of the different forms of feedback, and that comments or oral feedback can be just as impactful or important as marks. Chapters describe C conditions regardless of the form of feedback that need to be in place before offering feedback. First, students need a clear vision of intended learning. The second is instructional activities need to align directly with intended learning, and the students need to see that connection. The third is assessments need to be set up so that students can interpret the results as indicators of what they have or have not yet learned. Feedback also can take many forms. Some are more effective than others, some are equally as effective as others, and some overlap with each other. For example, there are oral and written feedback. Oral and written feedback, Oral feedback is usually given during a lesson, while written feedback tends to be given after a task. Oral feedback is sometimes underestimated because it's less formal, but it can be very powerful and effective tool as it can be provided easily in the teachable moment and its timely way. For example, asking students, what do you do notice about, or how does it match the criteria, stimulates their thinking about their learning. And about effective written feedback, provide students with a record of what they are doing well, what needs improvement, and suggests next step. Effective written feedback also needs to be timely, written in a manner that is understandable to the student and actionable so that the student can make revisions. Written feedback needs to include information about where the student has met the learning intentions and or success criteria, the where improvement is still required. The next feedbacks are evaluative and descriptive feedback. Feedback can also be either evaluative, involving a value judgment, or descriptive, providing guidance for improvement. Evaluate feedback in the form of grades or brief general comments. For example, well done provides some information about learning but doesn't convey the information and the guidance that the students can use to improve. In attempting to create a positive climate for learning, many teachers increase the level of praise they give during feedback sessions. Research shows, however, that praise needs to be realistic if the feedback is to be meaningful. To be really effective, praise needs to be confirm a child's own sense of reality. The impact of feedback on learning achievement has been found to be low when focused on praise, rewards, and punishments. Descriptive feedback provides students with detailed, specific information about improving their learning. So this means descriptive feedback is linked to the learning that is expected, addresses faulty interpretations and the lack of understanding, and provides students with visible and manageable next steps. These next steps are based on assessment of work at hand and the image of good work looks like, so that they can begin to take on the responsibility of self-assessing and self-controlling. An example of descriptive feedback is, that's a good introduction because you have covered the main points we discussed at the beginning. Now, which points do you think you should expand on? The next types of feedback is informal and formal feedback. Teachers can meet with a few students per day or per week depending on specific projects, deadlines, and the individual students' needs. It's important to plan these conferences in a structured way with a focus on individualized goals so both teacher and student make good use of their time. When preparing and holding student-teacher conferences, remember the following. Look at the student work beforehand. Use a checklist or feedback form that the student can use as a reference for making revisions. Focus on 2 or 3 items that need work and show how to improve them. Make time for students to ask questions and give input. When teachers use formal conferencing along with informal feedback, students are better protected from failure and are set up for success. Informal check-ins can be used to see how students are progressing and usually occur during the learning. Check-ins are considered informal and vitally important to providing effective feedback. They occur when the teacher visits students as they are engaged in tasks to make sure they are on the right track, can quickly and effectively steer students in the right direction and enhance learning. Formal feedback is often written or a combination of oral, written, and usually occurs at the end of the task. It can be provided through structured conferences with specific goals. Next is peer and self-feedback. Peer feedback occurs when students offer each other advice and suggestions in relation to each other's work. Self-feedback must be taught explicitly to ensure students have the skills to apply this to their own work. One way to facilitate peer feedback is through the use of structured peer conferences. This provides students with the opportunity to give and receive feedback about ongoing work, and the positive aspect is that students get to see other students' work, which can also deepen understanding of the learning goals. Once students have had time to practice know what the requirements are aware of expectation, peer conferences can be an integral part of the feedback process. As with teacher feedback, peers can offer suggestions and comment on what has been done well in relation to the learning intention. This is a success criteria. What still needs to be done in order to achieve the learning intention. How to achieve that improvement. However, left to their own devices to give feedback, many students will use the time to chat, criticize the other students' work, or get nothing done. To counteract their teachers need to model and role play how to give feedback in constructive way, explicitly teach students how to provide effective feedback to each other, hold students accountable for the comments, suggestions, and feedback they give on another. Use scaffolds like peer feedback forums, which can be checked by the teacher to provide more structure to peer conference. Self-feedback is the ultimate goal of feedback for learning. Teachers can help students to become more independent through explicit modeling and instruction, and teaching the skills of the self-assessment and goal setting. To help students reach autonomy, teachers can explicitly identify, share, and clarify learning goals and success criteria, model the application of criteria, using samples, provide guided opportunities for self-feedback, teach students how to use feedback to determine next steps and set goals, allow time for self-feedback or reflection. And in the end, I want to finish the video with the words of Elon Musk. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you are constantly thinking about what you have done and how you could be doing it better. This is what tech entrepreneur Elon Musk refers to as his single best piece of advice. We should always be thinking about how we can evolve and grow, and this is why a culture where people practice giving and receiving feedback every day can be powerful. It's about having growth mindset where I see our skills as adaptable and believe they can be developed upon. And the good news is we can all learn to adapt and grow mindset. So thank you for your attention.